So I'm going to look at what the legislature has done. Our team has been responsive to questions the legislature has put to us. We need to make sure that we're working together as best we can to have a budget that pays the bills for the state. And as I've said many times before, we have a sincere hope and belief that there will be help that comes from the federal government, because without it, we will, this state and states all across the nation will end up laying off firefighters and police officers and nurses and so many other people, and the services that people need exactly in one of the worst economic circumstances that we've had will go away without that federal help.
Governor Greg Bishop, the CenterSquare.com.
Hey, Greg.
A lot of questions coming in, of course, about unemployment. I've got a few of my own. Talking with some state lawmakers, Fred Crespo being one of them. He said that he's talked with IDES, trying to get answers.
Yep.
Says that it's time for you to work with the legislature to do something about this problem.
Sure.
When's that going to happen, and what does that look like?
What we've talked to the legislature about, particularly with the budget, as you know, IDS is one of those agencies that was woefully inadequately funded for many years. And we talk about government getting hollowed out over the last few years. That's just one of the agencies, but it is one of them. And you can imagine that, well, gee, when the economy is getting better every year, people don't pay much attention to the unemployment system because it's small. It doesn't really affect that many people. That's the theory that the General Assembly has gone by for many years. Now here we are, right, with all that underfunding affecting IDS. So I am absolutely, we're working with them on making sure we get the right funding levels for IDS, and secondly, that we are working to use that funding to upgrade the systems that exist and the people, because there's been a drop in the number of employees.
And a follow up with the unemployment issue. Businesses have made significant sacrifices during the pandemic.
Yes.
How is your administration going to help offset the expected increased burden because of unemployment insurance?
Yeah. So again, two things to keep in mind. I mean, first, this is typically unemployment is something that is an agreed upon understanding between business and labor and employees, and so we're going to continue that. But as every state in the United States, and I've talked to many Republican and Democratic governors about unemployment in particular, and about the funding of unemployment. Again, this is part of what the CARES Act, or this next HEROES Act, addresses, is unemployment support, and we're going to need that like every other state.
Also, with unemployment, when do you anticipate things getting back to normal? This is from Peter Hancock of Capital News, Illinois. And are the programs now in place, extended benefits and the federally funded pandemic-related extensions, going to be enough to carry people through?
I'm concerned that it's not enough. I'll be honest with you. I see the $600 extra that people got and are getting in unemployment benefits. Even that, added on top of the existing unemployment benefits, doesn't seem to be enough. And when you think about the amount of time that it looks like that the economists, not me, but the economists are saying that it might take us to get back to normal, I'm concerned that, that the typical number of weeks that are allowed, it may not be enough.
On to the budget. How realistic is it for the state to spend around the same next year as it's spending this year, given the state's dire financial situation?
Yeah, so again, one of the challenges when you get into an emergency, when you get into an economic downturn, is that you have not only an increased number of people unemployed, a decreased number of people who are paying taxes, revenues dropping for the state. You also have a massive increase in the amount of services that people need. When middle-class families drop their incomes substantially, people who've never needed the state's support, perhaps, now they need that support. So you can't say as a state, well, we're just not going to help people. And that's why we've asked the federal government, like all the other states, that for help. We're just trying to replace the revenues that were lost. This is not anything more than that.
Well, and on that question about getting funding from like the Federal Reserve Fund, for instance, I spoke with Congressman Ronnie Davis today. He said, it's a good program, glad the state's looking into it, but he says it still doesn't take away the bad policies the state's had in place for decades that have led to a lot of the underfunding that's happened even before the pandemic. Is it time to reassess those programs and the policies that have been in place to ensure that we're ready for any other possible pandemics or any other disasters that may be down the pipe.
First of all, once again, if all we did was restore the state to where it would have been, we still would have challenges, no doubt about it. And so that's not something that's started this year, right? That's something that existed for years before became governor. So I think that Congressman Davis probably does understand that balancing the budget is a hugely important goal of mine that I've been focused on since before I became governor. We balanced the budget. We put the only budget that I put forward, the first budget that I put forward, was a balanced budget. Indeed, even reporting, you could look at COGFA numbers and others, but even reporting up to the time of the pandemic, we were on track to have a mild surplus in the state, something that hasn't happened for a long time, which would have been used to pay down some of our bills. We were on track to do better. Obviously everybody has a different opinion about how much you should do, how fast, and so on. But here we are. Look, here we are. We have to take care of people in our state who need us at this exact moment. This is what government is for.
Well, but on that, you've said multiple times we would have had a balanced budget if it wasn't for the pandemic. The comptroller put out the COGFA, Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. It said like $197 billion of unfunded liabilities. How can you say it's balanced if you've got those massive liabilities?
Right. Well, that's a balance sheet issue. Just to separate these things, right? You've got an income statement essentially for a state budget, and you've got a balance sheet. And there's no doubt that there are challenges in our balance sheet, right? And these are, again, things that have occurred for many years. And you know that I've talked and indeed put forward plans and indeed got some of them passed to start to, make changes in the way we deal with our balance sheet. So I'm going to continue to do that. But right now, we have to focus on just lifting up, providing supports for small businesses, for families, for people who've never been in this situation before, and the people who have been for some years in need of social services.
We'll get to a variety of other issues outside of the budget, but just to follow up on the budget, since it is budget season, we've got June 1st,
budget
July
season,
1st.
all 3 days of it.
Right, exactly. After this is done, is it time to reassess the policies that have led to, before the pandemic, the incredible financial problems that the state's had?
Yeah, and as I say, when you set aside, and it's hard to do that, but setting aside the question of the effect that the pandemic has had on our budget, if you were able to put that aside, we've been making progress. And again, we have differences of opinion about how fast that progress is and what we ought to be doing. This is not a business, though. I want to be clear. Running government is not like running a business. You would take maybe different measures if you were running a business. Here, our job is to take care of people. That is to say, people who are in need, people who are falling through the cracks, people who are in extreme poverty, people who now have lost their jobs, people who need medical care, who no longer have insurance. So our job is to provide those services for them in government. And so for people who want to make massive cuts in government today, think about who you're doing that to. You're doing that to the middle class, you're doing that to the working class, you're doing that to the people who need government the most.
State Fair, big economic driver here. My colleague Jim Leach at WMAY asking, Ohio has just canceled their 2020 State Fair. When do you expect to make a formal decision on the State Fair here in Illinois? And if so, if it's canceled, how do you comply with the state law that says the fair shall be held in DuQuoin and Springfield?
We're working on that now. I don't have an answer for you. We're still trying to figure out what we can do, if there's something we can do. But again, on the current situation of phase 2, moving into phase 3, we couldn't do it within that time frame. But it isn't scheduled for that time frame. So I'm very hopeful. Once again, I've said all along that the greatest thing that would happen, and I hope everybody will put this in their prayers today, would be an effective treatment and or a vaccine, because if that happens, then we can do things like have this.
I think that law says an annual fair shall be held. So do you think it would be something, you may cancel it, but then revisit it and see if we can postpone it or something to that effect?
I think all of us enjoy the state fair, so I would love to make it happen. We just have to, do the best we can.
Matt Roy with WICS News Channel 20 asks, we've received a lot of calls from youth sports leagues wondering what specifications are in place for when Phase 3 and 10-person gathering sizes are happening. Mainly, they've been wondering if there will only be 10 on a field or multiple groups of 10. Can you offer any clarification when it comes to Phase 3 for gatherings when it comes to sports?
Yep. We're certainly working with IDPH to make sure that summer sports, to the extent we can do it with 10 or fewer people, that we want to make that happen. Again, more outdoor activity within the parameters of what the epidemiologists are saying I want. I think it will be difficult to have crowds in a stand watching those games.